It's still morning, so good morning, everybody. Good, we got that one up there. When I came out here today, if you hadn't heard her speak a little bit about what I was going to speak about, you probably wouldn't expect that I would be telling you that I lived a horrifically abusive childhood in a typical Midwestern neighborhood where we played kickball in the street and went to the same school and churches. And I even had a poodle, but it was the 60s. So through the years, I recovered the memories and I healed. And friends often told me I should write my book. And I thought, why should I write a book? Nobody wants to read about that. But when I talked to certain people and they felt better after what we talked about, eventually I decided to write my story. And there we go. So I wrote my story, my memoir. And then after I had it published, I was going to go speak to service groups and churches and schools and book clubs, and I did. But before I got it all completely finished, this is kind of the reaction that you get. People want to lean in, they want me to talk softer. We don't talk about this in public. But you know what? I'm not whispering. I'm going to talk in a regular voice because today is a safe zone. Today is a shame-free, blame-free, safe zone. And what we're going to talk about is what child abuse is, what the statistics are, what research shows that abuse and trauma does to kids' bodies and minds. We're going to talk about having gentle conversations, what to do if you suspect abuse or trauma, and finally, trauma-informed communities. So as I wrote my book and as I started speaking to groups, they'd listen intently, and then they would smile, and they'd shake my hand, and they'd thank me for coming, and then they'd leave. And I didn't know what was going on. Why weren't they running after me trying to find out how they could change this? I told them that 1 in 4 children are abused, that 1.25 million kids every year suffer abuse. And I told them that we spend $124 billion as a nation to fix the problems that these kids endure for the rest of their lives. And then I told them about a really, really important study. It's called the ACE study. It was started in 1995. Kaiser PPO, they inquired from people if they would be willing to answer a childhood survey. So they got 17,000 participants, and they answered questions about their childhood, whether there was verbal, emotional, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, whether there was substance abuse in the house, or whether there was mental illness that was not treated. And what they suddenly found, they thought it would take decades, but what they suddenly found in 2 years is that the adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs, the number that they had correlated with the diseases of their body. So they were at risk for every system in their body: heart disease, lung disease, liver, kidney, autoimmune, cancer, to the point that it cut 20 years off the life expectancy that they would normally live. And with the new technology and with the awareness of DNA, they figured out and they found out that abuse actually damages DNA. So these kids are going into adulthood. And they're going into adulthood with damaged DNA. So of course they're going to have a problem with every system in their body because it's already breaking down. So I'm trying to figure out, if I'm telling them all this stuff, why aren't they chasing me out to my car saying, let me help, how can I help, what can I do? And finally, after months of talks and nobody chasing me to my car, I finally figured out it's denial. Denial stems from our desire to avoid pain. And I get that. We all get that. But what happens? Suddenly that denial develops to this huge elephant. And you can have clinicians, educators, community members, and they're all tiptoeing around this elephant, and they're all whispering around this elephant. And the more you tiptoe and the more you whisper, the bigger and scarier it gets. So how do you deal with this elephant in the room? Well, you get people like me that don't shut up. People that are silence breakers. And I can be a silence breaker, but I need somebody to come up behind me, and another, and another, and another, until finally the truth becomes so real and so talked about that the elephant doesn't exist anymore. If you think this can't happen, do you remember in 2018 when the actress on social media said that she was sexually assaulted at a concert? And within a few short weeks, 5 million people said, "Me too." This is what I want our community, our nation, to finally figure out. This is what I felt like inside as a kid. I knew I would hold back tears that would well up in my eyes. I had horrible anxiety, terrible, and depression, but it wasn't safe to show any of that. So I just internalized it all and just kept moving forward. And my memories were locked in a box in the back of my mind. I didn't remember what happened. And experts in the field of abuse and trauma tell you that sometimes situations can be so bad your brain can't process it. So you oftentimes will pull that back into this box, which I did, and it was sealed tight. And sometimes people will have a seep out. Oh no, not me, I don't do it like that. Mine exploded out when I was in my early 30s because my ages of my kids triggered my memories. I was having memories in my sleep. I was waking up saying, this is now, that was then. This is now, that was then. I thought I was going crazy, but then all the puzzle pieces of my life fit together. Why all the anxiety? Why all the depression? Why all the injuries with no explanations? And why the injuries with explanations that made no sense whatsoever? Well, Bessel van der Kolk, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk wrote one of the best books that I've ever read on child abuse and trauma. He's an expert in the field, and I'm paraphrasing. But he said, if a child has an experience with a person that makes them feel safe, cared for, and validated, they can hold that memory, that deep, deep memory in their mind until later in their life, years or decades later, when they work through what happened to them. But if a child never has that experience, never has someone that makes them feel safe, cared for, validated, it's so hard for them because they don't have a memory to draw on to connect to human kindness, healing, and empathy. And that was me. I certainly didn't have a family member. I didn't have a neighbor. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have a teacher. No one. So how am I standing up here in front of you telling you about this? Well, one day, one of the worst memories made me realize it was the most important and impactful day of my life as a child. I was being abused, and I was screaming for them to stop. And so in an attempt to silence me and muffle my scream, someone threw a blanket over my face. Well, it worked. I stopped screaming. Not because of the blanket over my face, but because I stopped breathing. And if you've ever heard of near-death experiences or read about them, I did. I came up out of my body. I looked down. I wasn't afraid. Your spirit is your spirit. And I realized that really important. They can touch your mind and they can touch your body, but no one can ever touch your spirit. But in that second, I saw a light that was so incredible, so beautiful, I couldn't get to it fast enough. But that doesn't really explain it, because in the light there is no time. There's no space, there's no dimension. It's all knowledge, it's all love, and complete peace. And in that moment of being held and loved and enveloped in that peace and love, I knew I had to make a choice. I had the choice to stay in this light, this beautiful, incredible love. Or I could come back to this childhood and then grow older. And I knew that I was going to have kids. And I knew I had to have my children. I already loved them. They were spirits of the light. And I also knew that I needed to come back and name the elephant in the room. And I needed to be a silence breaker. So instead of just speaking to crowds now, what I do is I changed my company to a not-for-profit. Like there's a million of them, right? But grantors want the collaboration. So I can collaborate with other small nonprofits and community organizations, and we can pool our resources. And we can do much more for kids and families that need it. I also teach educators and clinicians about trauma and the ACE study. And since the ACE study, they've added other abuses like homelessness, violence in the neighborhood, witnessing direct violence, refugees that are separated from their family, even natural disasters. It's all trauma to the kids, and it all causes the same damage. I also talk about resiliency, and I can teach resiliency through it's not meditation, it's mindfulness meditation to kids as young as 3, and they're so cute when they do it, all the way up to 100. And what that helps kids do, and it helps everybody, it helps you to center your mind so that you've got a relaxed state. And I lived my whole life in a fight, flight, or fear. Or freeze, rather, sorry about that. And that's a bad place to make decisions. That's a bad place to do what you need to do, but a lot of kids do that. And then I help create trauma-informed communities. And what a trauma-informed community is, usually starts really high, state level, city level, gets all these leaders. Well, how do you do that? What I'm trying to do is start it from the ground up. Little groups, your church, your school friends, your grade school. And essentially what a trauma-informed community does is it pulls everybody from all sectors of your community together, eventually. But it changes the question that you ask. And instead of saying, what is wrong with that kid? You say, wow, what happened to that child? And it changes every way that you respond and that you approach them. There we go. So what can you do? Well, you can't do anything if you don't know the signs of abuse. And the reason I have a smartphone up here is because you can go to my website, stopthecycletogether.com, and it's right there. But if you forget that, Google it. Child abuse, signs and symptoms. You'll just get page after page after page from really great places. And then once you know what those signs are, because kids can't tell you, but they can sure show you. Once you know those, you can report suspected child abuse anonymously. And you may think, well, what's the difference? It may make it harder for them now. But what about 6 months down the road when somebody else does it? And then maybe 6 months down the road when the school. And then suddenly a red flag goes up and they get resources, they get support, they get help. And we stop this vicious cycle. I help and we help it stop the cycle. Anybody who wants to start a small trauma-informed community will help you. You can call, you can text, you can email, you can send a carrier pigeon. I don't care, I'll respond. Gentle conversations are so important. Ask your physician. I asked my internist if she knew about the ACE study, and she's a Kaiser doc. She had never heard of it. So I sent her a video. And then I found another doctor. But you can ask the teachers too. Have you ever heard of informed communities that work with schools? Trauma-informed education. Gentle conversations. And then remember that deep memory. Be there for a child. You have no idea what you can do by being that significant person to create that deep memory of love and safety and caring. And so today I invite you all. I invite you all to, at dinner, go out to dinner, name the elephant, cite a statistic. The kids need help. 1 in 4 children, if 1 in 4 kids had measles, the whole country would be going crazy. Name the elephant. Speak for the children. Be a silence breaker. Because I don't want any other child to ever have to grow up and say the title of my book, "Thank God I Died." Thank you.